Guys, the other day, I finally turned the big 30. Guys, I'm 30. I've been on this earth for 30 freaking years. So I wanted to make this video kind of reflecting on 30 years of being a car guy. Talk kind of how I got into cars, talk about me and what influenced me and probably the rest of our millennial generation, and then talk about what I think is kind of going to happen to future car generations, like Gen Z and then what comes after Gen Z. So as most people that grew up as millennials, we had a lot of really cool influences as far as cars go. Like, we grew up with the Fast and Furious franchise, we grew up with the movie Cars, we had all these cool things. And then not to mention, like, on the gaming aspect of it, we grew up with, you know, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, like the old good Need for Speeds, Forza, like all these awesome car games that really got everyone into cars. Not to mention the old like Grand Theft Auto games. And that stuff was really awesome because that's kind of how all of us got introduced to a lot of cars. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, like you don't see that stuff on the street often as is, let alone, you know, 10, 20 years ago, you didn't see them on the roads. Maybe you saw them at car shows, but there were these mythical exclusive machines that no one really owned, if that kind of makes sense. That was kind of our exposure to these cool cars. You know, you see the cool cars on Fast and Furious, Cars, all that kind of stuff. And it was really awesome growing up that way because it built our dream cars a different way from, I think, the current generation. Whereas we saw like one really cool car in a movie or drove something really specific in a game, and that kind of like cemented a certain dream car for most of our generation, you know, a certain poster car. The modern generation has social media. They see like every single car on there, and because you see every single car so much, so often, and you see every version of it, you see the basic specs, you see the high-end specs. Like, take an Aventador, for example, right? A Lamborghini Aventador. Back in the day, when the Aventador came out, it was the coolest thing. And whenever you saw one on the road, because I've seen a few of them on the road, you know, when it came out, it was like the coolest thing. You would follow it for a little while, you would listen to it, and it was so cool. That stuck with you. Now everyone online looks at, oh, the Aventador SVJ, you got this version, that version, and no one cares about, you know, the lesser models or really all these models in general. You could have a cool car and, you know, the new generation will pretty much say, yeah, I've seen that on Instagram, who cares? That car's only got 950 horsepower. This car has 1,050. I think the new generation cares too much about horsepower, right? But I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. But as far as getting into cars goes, I pretty much got into it the same way everyone else. I watched the same movies, played the same games, and a lot of it, I had the same influence. And I think my generation, we grew up liking certain types of, you know, cars, like sports cars, whereas the new generation, they're all about, you know, the Bugatti and, you know, the Paganis and like all these hyper cars that are unattainable for 99% of people out there. It's a bit of a shame because I think too, our generation appreciates a lot more cars because we've kind of grown up with the creep of power that power does, right? Like, cars inevitably get more powerful, and there's that kind of power creep through the years. And we pretty much saw all of it. Like, we saw cars with like 350 horsepower that were incredibly fast, up to now when cars are making like 2,000 horsepower, which is insane. We grew up in a time where we could really appreciate everything. Like, my M2 is what? 365 horsepower, which by modern standards is not that much. Put this car back in like 2014 and it's actually a pretty quick car when you look at it comparatively to what was available at the time. It's fairly quick for what you got. But now everything's just about power and horsepower and numbers, and I think it's a bit of a shame for the new generation because, again, the new generation, like Gen Z and all of them, like, you see all this stuff on Instagram and it becomes very easy to miss a lot of cool cars along the way. And I think our generation as millennials, we can appreciate a lot more through the whole spectrum of cars. Like, I have cars that I really want to own and really like that nowadays, like, no one cares about. They're underpowered. Their aesthetics may not be what everyone wants nowadays because they don't have giant wings on them. They don't have all these aero kits and whatever. But that's just a different time that I think us millennials can kind of appreciate growing up with. And two, through the years, I've also come to appreciate a broader spectrum of cars too, which I think comes with age. I say that being 30, I'm not, 50, 60 years old. But 30 years is a long time to kind of appreciate cars. Obviously, the first, 8 or whatever years, you don't really know what's going on. But as you get older, you kind of appreciate everything. Like, I appreciate my luxury cars now. My daily driver, I have an Impreza, and I love that thing for its practicality and all the daily drivability of that car. Whereas the M2, I mean, yeah, it's a fun car. It's nice, but I appreciate a lot of stuff now. I think that's something that really comes with age, and I think the newer generation might struggle a little bit with that. And again, I think a lot of that is because of social media. The new generation really misses out on, I think, a lot of those kinds of cars because they glorify only the sports cars, only the exotics. Why would anyone buy a beautifully spec'd, really comfortable Lexus when you could buy a M5? And it's I get it, I do, but you gotta appreciate everything. And that's the thing, I appreciate my luxury cars, I appreciate, the shit boxes. I appreciate a lot of stuff now that I never used to. And that really came with age. Now I'd love to have a third car that's just a luxury focused car. Quiet, smooth, a nice Lexus or a nice 4 Series or 7 Series. Something that just quietly takes me from point A to point B. I don't necessarily need a loud, violent car, even though I do still love them and I do still want them. I don't necessarily need it as much as I think younger me. Now, of course, my dream car is still a Ferrari. There are specific Ferraris that I like. Obviously, as you can see, I'm a Ferrari guy. I have my Michael Schumacher Omega Speedmaster. So I love my Ferrari. And I think too, other things that I've appreciated over the years is racing. Growing up, you play some racing games. You play Gran Turismo, maybe Forza, maybe some kind of racing games here and there. Growing up, I was never big into Formula One or rally racing, endurance racing, none of that stuff. I never really cared growing up, but as I got older, I started getting into Formula One quite heavily. Now, I'm a huge Formula One fan. Obviously, you could see who I root for. And I appreciate some of the racing legends of old. I'm wearing a Michael Schumacher watch, even though Michael Schumacher was basically before my time. Now I have, Lewis Hamilton generation. You got Max Verstappen. You have all these modern legends. But I can appreciate the history of racing a lot more and kind of how racing has progressed as I kind of see it progress through my life. Because that's the thing too, when you're younger, you don't appreciate the progression of things over time as much as when you're older. Because when you're a little bit older, and again, I'm only 30, you see things age and progress in front of your eyes. Like cars, I very distinctly remember what cars looked like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, up to now, and you see that progression. So when you look through history and you look at cars from 50, 60 years ago, but well before my time, you can really start to appreciate how cars have developed. And that's the same thing with racing too. I've seen kind of racing evolve. I didn't get into it until I was a little bit older, but you kind of see it evolve year by year. And when you look back, you're wow, it's changed so much over, just 5, 6, 7 years. And that's the crazy thing is you learn to appreciate things a lot more. And I think that's kind of the gist of what I'm getting at with this video. As you get older, you appreciate the car world a little differently. You appreciate the classics. You see modern classics being born. You see, racing legends come and go. You see, your own taste in cars change. I never used to be huge into watches, and now I really am into watches. And this was the first, really nice, proper luxury watch I bought because I really love the racing history behind it. These are kind of the small, awkward things that you really appreciate as you get older. That's kind of something that I learned about myself kind of becoming 30 is, when I was a kid, seeing races and stuff on TV, all that stuff is cool. You see a cool car on the road, really nice. But when you see the progression over time, it just hits so differently. And I can't imagine how the car world is going to look 20, 30 years from now. And that brings me to kind of, the last point of this video. And that's what I think is coming in the future for the car world. Because our generation, again, we grew up in a different time. We didn't have electric cars. Now you have electric cars pretty much everywhere. That's clearly where everything is going. Electric cars, and hopefully instead of all electrification, we start looking at things like alternative fuels, synthetic fuels, stuff like that, which I think is really promising, instead of pushing for just electric. Because these new cars, they have no passion, they have no soul, no character, and this modern generation, I feel like they miss out on so much, and they're going to miss out on so much. engines are getting smaller. You know, the V10 sports cars are now becoming V8s. The V8s are becoming V6s. The 6s are becoming 4s. And everything's downsizing. And I get the environmental concerns to a degree, but like, you drive behind a yellow school bus that's just pumping black shit out of the exhaust, but God forbid someone has an 8-cylinder engine that they drive once or twice a month, or maybe once a week. This new generation is, I think, gonna experience a lot of changes with cars, and I think it's for the worst, honestly. I think technologically it's gonna get better. Obviously, cars are gonna become more advanced. It's gonna be a lot cooler. They're gonna be able to do things that no one can even probably imagine now, but at the expense of soul and passion. That's why I think we have to, as enthusiasts, really preserve. Like this car, I bought a manual. Manuals are obviously going away. Everyone knows manuals are starting to disappear. People don't buy them anymore. Many people don't even know how to drive them anymore. And I specifically bought a manual M2 without properly knowing how to drive it, just to kind of keep the manual alive, so I can have that experience of a manual transmission. And I absolutely love it. I do still absolutely love the dual clutch transmissions, paddle shifters. I'm a huge fan of, because they kind of tie back to that racing history. By falling in love with one technology, we lose another technology, and that is a bit of a shame. As kind of cars evolve, we lose that analog feel. And now being 30, I've really been able to see that decline through the years of these proper machines to these technological computers. And while it is cool, it is a shame. I would say to any of you guys that are Gen Z or in the new generation, try your best to preserve being a car enthusiast. Try your best to appreciate all the cars in the spectrum. Don't just look at Andrew Tate's Bugatti and think that's the car. I need a Bugatti and nothing else. Like, appreciate everything in between. Buy yourself a Miata. Enjoy a Miata for a bit. Buy an older Corvette. Buy a new Corvette. Buy a GR86. Buy a WRX. Work around these cars, you know. Delve into your first exotic. Buy an Aston Martin. A little V8 Vantage. Maybe move up to an Audi R8. Enjoy the whole spectrum as you kind of go through life. That's what I'm doing my best to try to do. There are cars that I do want that are incredibly powerful, but I'm trying to enjoy everything kind of as a journey. You know, I bought an M240i. I loved it. Traded it for an M2 in a dual clutch. That car was gone. I bought a manual M2 for a slightly different experience. The next car I'm going to buy, I'm not going to disclose what that car is yet, but it's going to be an entry-level exotic, and it's something I really want to try. As far as new cars go, it's not very powerful. It's not very quick. It drives like crap from what I hear, but it's a special car, and that's, I think, what we need to preserve. We need to preserve these cars, the history, the heritage. So I don't know. I know this video is a bit of a messy ramble, but I think turning 30 is kind of a big point. You know, as you turn 30, everyone kind of looks at the same things. You know, you buy a house, you start a family, you get more practical, you get rid of the sports cars, and you buy more reasonable things. But I think we need to preserve the enthusiasm for these things. I've kind of seen the decline in car culture. I've seen the toxicity emerge in car culture, and it's a real shame, guys. So that's my reflection on kind of where I think the car community stands, where I think some of our influences are versus the modern influences with social media. It's just a different time, and I'm glad to have been brought up along with cars when I did. Before I continue rambling on, I'm going to end this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys like my kind of thoughts on cars growing up and kind of our influences and where I think the car community is kind of going. Leave me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Subscribe if you want to see more videos. I really appreciate you watching the whole thing. If you made it this far, that's going to be all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.